there! Look at this weird hat! Why am I wearing this weird hat? Well, guess what? Today, right now, as I'm filming this, Bumblebee has finally launched and we are super excited. The first video did really well and we're hoping for them to continue to blossom into the world like the flowers the honeybees feed off of. I'm so excited. So let me know if you've subscribed down below in the comments, and if you haven't yet, go over and check it out. It's live now. Alright, let's get on to today's video. From world leaders to evil doctors, we've got it all on today's list of top 10 evil geniuses from history who needed to be stopped. Let's get going. Number 10, H.H. Holmes. I had a feeling that if I didn't include him at least once, somebody would be like, "You're wrong!" So here he is. Ah yes, the genius inspired by Sherlock Holmes himself, though he ended up being the villain of the story and far from the hero. Henry Howard Holmes was indeed a genius. He skipped a ton of grades, finished school at just 16, and gained a doctorate of medicine at just 23. What was I doing at 23? I was in acting school. But he had a desire for the dark side he just could not shake. His interest in medicine began with practicing on animals. In medical school, he was already dabbling in darkness when he started conning insurance claims and stealing corpses. But for Holmes, everything was building towards his one goal in life, the construction of the murder castle. By 1800 Chicago, Holmes eventually earned enough money to construct a massive labyrinth within a hotel of sorts. It had stores on the bottom and apartments above, each level booby-trapped with trapdoors, mazes, and chutes that would drop his victims into a basement with like vats of acid and crematoriums where it was just like nuts. Historians still debate how many people he killed, but they're thinking around 200. Wish they caught him before this happened, but alas, here he is on this list. Number 9, Andrew Cunanan, the man who shot Gianni Versace. Andrew had an IQ of 147, memorized a whole set of encyclopedias by the time he was 10 years old, and by the time he was 21 he could speak 7 languages. So where did it go wrong? There is no clear reason, but whatever it was, Andrew loved to lie about it. He was a prolific liar and made large claims about his family's origins, to the delight of the rich older men who indulged him. He craved a lavish, carefree lifestyle which rich millionaire Norman Blanchard gave him until he had enough sense to throw him out. This was a massive blow to Andrew's ego, and this led to a downward spiral which claimed the lives of 5 people. His ex-best friend Jeffrey Trail, his former lover David Madsen, Lee Miglin, William Reese, and then lastly Gianni Versace on July 15th, 1997. There are a lot of missing pieces in this case. Due to Andrew's disillusionment and the passion for lying, no one really knows why these murders happened, or even if he really knew Gianni before he shot him. By the time authorities caught up with him, Andrew had taken his own life, and there was no note left behind. So whatever the reason for his killing spree, perhaps even Andrew didn't even know the truth by the end. Number 8, John Christie. John Christie had so much potential, with an IQ of 128, and he was incredibly gifted in mathematics. Who knows what good he could have done for the world, but during the 1940s to the 1950s, Christie stole the lives of 8 women including his wife, and how he did it is stomach churning. He preyed on the desperate lives of women seeking help and posed as a backstreet abortionist. He would first knock them out with gas, but they would never wake up. When they passed out, he strangled them before or after doing other unmentionable things to them. He stashed the bodies underneath the floorboards, in the garden, or in the kitchen alcove. These horrors took place at 10 Rillington, Notting Hill, London, and the house has since been demolished. But one of the most awful things he did was frame the husband of a family who moved in above him. Christie killed his wife and their daughter and then set the husband up as the killer. The man, Timothy Evans, was forced into giving a false confession and was hung, and it was this miscarriage of justice that led to the suspension of capital punishment. Number 7, Lawrence Bittaker, aka the Toolbox Killer. Like many others on this list, a lot of potential to do good here, especially with an IQ of 138. But as this list kind of proves, just because your IQ sets high expectations doesn't mean you'll meet them. Bittaker was a high school dropout and turned to a life of crime early on. Bittaker, along with his accomplice Roy Norris, drove around in a blacked out van called the Murder Mac. The two met while serving a sentence at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo after both had developed a liking for crime. Somehow the two made parole, and for 3 months in 1979 they did awful things to 5 women using hand tools. What they did to those poor women inside their van is enough to churn the bile in your stomach, so I won't go into much detail. A psychologist's analysis of Bittaker was that he was borderline psychotic And Norris had a severe schizoid personality. The two were finally caught, with Norris receiving life in prison and Bittaker died on death row at the age of 79. Number 6. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer. We all know he was gonna be on this. I want to be clear about something. Having a high IQ is dependent on a lot of things. Education, nutrition, environment, etc. It doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb or smart or that you won't or will be successful. Somehow, the same man who drilled holes into humans' heads to turn them into zombies had an IQ of 145. So put that together. Dahmer became known as the Milwaukee Cannibal and is one of the most prolific serial killers to ever exist. He became fixated on animals at a young age. We know what happens after that, right? In 1978, Dahmer dropped out of business school due to alcohol abuse after just 3 months. He enlisted in the US Army to train as a medical specialist, but that didn't last long. He was discharged after he attacked 2 fellow soldiers. After that, Dahmer's mental health deteriorated even further, and he fell hard into alcoholism and began his killing spree. After one of his victims escaped and notified the police, when they got there, the chief medical examiner remarked, and I quote, "It was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene." Between 1971 and 1999, he killed 17 men in a variety of gruesome ways and celebrated each one with like trophies. Dahmer was killed behind bars by another inmate in 1994, and that is the end of his story. Number 5. Marcel Petiot. As if the war crimes of World War II weren't bad enough, Marcel Petiot had to add his villainy to the list. Marcel's life started out pretty rough, and due to his addiction to thievery was committed to an asylum. But instead of going to the asylum, he ended up earning his medical degree while interning. Sadly, he didn't use his intellect for good. Instead, he made an already horrific time even worse. Many Jewish people were trying to escape Europe for obvious reasons, and Marcel made sure many did not. He would tell his victims that he had a way out, a route to escape occupied France beneath the eyes of the German army. He claimed he was a part of the French resistance, gathering trust from many desperate souls, but when they fell prey to his plan, he would inject them quickly with cyanide and steal all of their valuables. Luckily, he was eventually captured and executed at the end of the war in 1946, but by then the damage had been done. Number 4. Ed Kemp. Funnily enough, I think this is only the second time I've actually mentioned Ed Kemper in a video, which is very surprising because he's Ed Kemp. Ed's strange talent for making people believe he was a gentle giant, all while committing 10 of the most gruesome crimes astounds me. With an IQ of 145, he easily manipulated his victims into trusting him before it was the last thing they ever did. Standing at 6'9" and weighing 250 pounds, he used both brawn and brains to overpower the women he killed. He showed obvious signs of a pathological need to kill from a young age, starting with the family cat all the way to killing his paternal grandparents at age 15. Even then, he was able to convince mental health professionals to let him go early because he was fine. Wow. From 1972 to 1973, Ed used the line, "I don't have all day," to convince hitchhikers to enter his car, implying he was in a rush, put pressure on them, and convinced them that he didn't have time to kill them. They also never caught him. He turned himself in. If you're still with us right now, remember to like and subscribe, and remember to head on over to Bumblebee to show some love as well. Number 3. Mao Zedong. It surprises me to no end that while I was in high school, we spent all of our time learning about Rudolf Mittler, but this guy totally slipped under the radar. I know the phrase "pick your battles" exists, but did no one think to pick this fight? Am I missing something? Let me know in the comments. Admittedly, the world probably couldn't handle it after the 85 million people who were lost in World War II, but from 1966 to 1976, Mao Zedong killed over 65 million of his own people in a vicious attempt to establish socialism. From mass starvation to burying 46,000 scholars alive, to flat out killing anyone who got in his way, he was vicious, brutal, and inhumane. His disastrous policies and revisions led to 50% of most villages dying from starvation. As his plans continued to fail, he developed the Red Army, a force composed of girls and boys from the ages 14 to 21 to roam cities and target enemies of the state, especially their teachers. Educated people, after all, are the biggest threat to poor leadership. They whisper ideas. So he would make them wear dunce hats, cover their faces with ink, and make them crawl on all fours and bark like dogs. Let's also not forget his expanded system of 1,000 forced labor camps. Need I say more? Number 2. Shiro Ishii. Talk about Dr. Evil. During World War II, Japanese prisoner of war camps were worse than hell could ever be on Earth. One of the reasons why was because of Dr. Shiro Ishii. He excelled in school and was even called a genius time and time and again. However, instead of using his mind for good, he became a monster. Shiro Ishii was the director of Unit 731 in the Department of Biological Weapons for the Imperial Japanese Army. Ishii dedicated most of his life to understanding the deadliest kinds of science, from disease warfare and inhumane experiments. He did it all to help Japan become the leader of the world. He would perform horrendous experiments on prisoners of war in their encampments, infecting them with diseases and testing out biological weapons on them. His unit even performed live vivisections on prisoners, inflicting them with hypothermia, frostbite, induced strokes, and heart attacks. He was never punished for his crimes and ended up avoiding prosecution for his crimes by turning his experiments over to the US. That's how he got out of it. They were like, you know what? We won't punish you if you give us the results. Number 1. Joseph Stalin. Need I say more? Need I really say more? Now, the world was just reeling from battling dollar store Charlie Chaplin for 5 years, who definitely was a man who needed to be stopped. But Stalin's forces did start out as an Axis power in World War II, but they eventually turned to our side and helped us out a great deal. But that doesn't, nor should it, diminish the fact that during his 30-year reign, he was responsible for the deaths of over 60 million people, 20 million of them being his own. That means he killed roughly 40,000 people per week during his reign. The closest we came to war with Stalin was the Cold War, a nuclear standoff between the US. His place on this list is a little controversial. After all, his dedication as a leader is one of the reasons Mustache Man bit the dust and World War II ended. But due to his murderous tendencies and paranoia, those in the grip of his iron fist would describe him as both a powerful leader, a genius, and a monster. And that was our list of top 10 evil geniuses from history who needed to be stopped. I've been your host, Rachel Fisher. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment, and until next time guys, take care.